My hands were still wet with mud as I clawed my way out of the shallow grave my father had buried me in. I remember choking on dirt, the thick taste of soil on my tongue, and my fingers trembling as they scraped against cold roots and broken twigs. My ribs screamed with pain and every breath I took was a battle. But I was alive. Somehow. Against all odds. I was still breathing. Just hours ago, I had seen my mother's lifeless eyes staring back at me from the floor of our living room. My father, his hands still shaking, told me it was an accident. But I saw the truth in the way he slammed the door behind him like he had planned it all. Then he turned to me. "You were always just like her," he said, voice low and cruel. "Too curious. Too loud. Too soft. I can't have that weakness around me anymore." Then everything went black. And now here I was, lying in a hole in the middle of the woods behind our house, with the rain pouring down and my heart pounding louder than the thunder above. I knew I couldn't go back. He thought I was dead. What kind of father does that to his child? I didn't know then what I was going to do. But I knew one thing: I was going to survive. And I was going to make him regret everything. But first I had to find a way out of those woods. My name is Marilyn James. I'm 76 years old now, a grandmother of 4, and I live in a quiet white house with blue shutters in rural Ohio. Most people know me as the sweet old lady who bakes cookies every Saturday and knits blankets for the church babies. But I carry a story inside me that not even my own children fully know. Because how do you tell your grandkids that your own father tried to bury you alive? How do you explain that the man who once picked you up on his shoulders and spun you around in the garden ended your mother's life with his bare hands? You don't. You let them believe in fairy tales. You give them the peace you never had. But sometimes, when the nights are quiet and the air is heavy, I still see his face in my dreams. I still hear the way he said my name that day. "Marilyn. Just like your mother. Soft. Weak." But I wasn't weak. I was 17. I was terrified. But I survived. Let me tell you how it all began. I grew up in a tiny town in West Virginia, the kind with one grocery store, 2 churches, and a gas station that doubled as the gossip center. My mom, Susan James, was the heart of our home. She had soft blonde hair just like mine and a laugh that could make you forget you were having the worst day of your life. She was a nurse at the local clinic and people adored her. Strangers would stop by our porch just to bring her fresh peaches or thank her for checking on their babies. But my dad, well, he was something else. Peter James was a war veteran, proud, cold, and strict. He believed in discipline, routine, and silence at the dinner table. He hated laughter. He hated mess. And above all, he hated being questioned. And yet, somehow my mom loved him. She always said, "Peter wasn't always like this, baby. The war changed him." I think she wanted to believe that. Needed to. But I saw the way she flinched when he raised his voice. I saw the bruises she covered with long sleeves in summer. And one night I saw her cry quietly in the pantry, her head against the flour sacks, whispering, "Please, God, just give me strength to leave." I was just a teenager, but I understood too much. I knew my father had a rage inside him like a volcano, quiet one minute and erupting the next. I learned to tiptoe, to nod, to say, "Yes, sir," even when it burned my tongue. But I also knew I couldn't live like that forever. I started applying to colleges in secret. My mom helped me. She even hid the acceptance letters under her sewing machine. She wanted better for me. She wanted me far away from the man she was too afraid to leave. But then, everything changed. The night of May 19, 1965. It was raining hard. I remember because I was in my room working on a scholarship essay when I heard it, glass shattering. A scream. Then silence. I ran downstairs, barefoot, heart hammering. And there she was. My mother, lying still. My father was standing above her, a shattered lamp in his hand. His face was pale. His lips muttering, "She pushed me. I didn't mean to." But there was no bruising on him. No cuts. Just her blood soaking into the carpet. He looked at me then. Something shifted in his eyes. "Marilyn," he said, slowly stepping toward me, "you always looked too much like her." That's when I ran. I didn't make it far. He caught me just before I reached the back door. Slammed my head against the wall. And everything went black. When I came, it was cold. My arms were tied. I was in a wheelbarrow. He was digging. I tried to scream, but my throat was dry. I could hear him muttering to himself, "It's the only way. Can't let them take me. She'll talk." Then he dropped me into the hole. I hit the bottom hard. I couldn't move. And then, dirt. Handfuls of it. Falling on my legs. My chest. My face. That moment, when I realized my own father was burying me alive, it broke something in me. But it also woke something up. A scream rose from my belly like fire. I twisted. I kicked. I bit through the gag with everything I had. And I fought. I clawed like an animal. Dirt in my eyes. My hair soaked with rain. I don't know how long I dug before I saw moonlight. But when I did, I knew I would never be the same again. And just when I thought I could crawl to the main road and beg for help, I heard it. The sound of his boots. Coming back. He had realized I wasn't dead. And this time he was bringing a shovel. I didn't have time to think. All I knew was that I had to move. The moon gave me just enough light to see the thick trees ahead. My body ached. My left ankle felt twisted and my hands were raw from digging. But I pushed myself up and limped deeper into the woods. Branches scratching my arms, thorns tugging at my nightgown, every step screaming with pain. Behind me I heard him. The sound of twigs snapping. His heavy breathing. The way he muttered my name like a curse. Marilyn, you shouldn't have done that. That voice still haunts me. I didn't dare look back. I just kept moving. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I would make it. But my mama didn't raise a coward. I remembered her words just days before she died. She had cupped my face and whispered, Marilyn, if anything ever happens to me, run. Don't wait. Don't think. Just run. He knew. Somewhere deep down she knew he would do something like this. I was about a mile from the house when I heard a car horn. At first I thought it was in my head. But then I saw headlights, blinding and beautiful, cutting through the trees. I stumbled toward the road and collapsed on the gravel shoulder, waving my arms, screaming, help. Please. The truck screeched to a stop. A man jumped out, middle-aged, beard, a plaid jacket. Jesus Christ, he shouted. What happened to you? I could barely talk. I just sobbed. My father, he killed my mom. He tried to bury me. I blacked out before I could finish. When I woke up, I was in a small hospital room. White walls. A warm blanket. Beeping machines. A kind-looking nurse hovered beside me. Sweetheart, you're safe now. Just rest. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't breathe. Did they get him? I rasped. The nurse hesitated. They're looking into it. The sheriff has deputies at your house right now. I didn't feel safe. Not really. Because I knew my father. He was smart. Calculated. A man who cleaned up his messes before anyone could catch him. If they didn't catch him immediately, he'd disappear. Hours later, Sheriff Tom Watkins came to see me. He was a thick man with a round belly and a voice that tried too hard to be gentle. Marilyn, he said, sitting beside my bed, I'm sorry about your mama. She was a good woman. I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks. I went to the house, he continued. Found signs of a struggle. Blood. Broken furniture. But no sign of your father. I knew it. He was already gone. For the next 2 days I stayed in that hospital. They kept me under watch, gave me food, pain meds, and space to heal. But I couldn't sleep. Not knowing where he was. Not knowing if he'd come for me again. On the 3rd day I got a visitor. It wasn't a nurse or the sheriff. It was my Aunt Rachel, my mom's sister. She hadn't spoken to us in years. Not since my father pushed her out of our lives. But now there she was, tears in her eyes, wrapping me in a tight, warm hug. I'm taking you with me, she said, holding my hands. You're not going back to that house. Ever. Aunt Rachel lived 2 towns over in a quiet little farmhouse with chickens, a vegetable garden, and shelves full of dusty books. It felt like heaven after everything I'd been through. For the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe. But even in that peaceful place I never let my guard down. Every creak of the floor. Every rustle outside the window. Thought it was him. I jumped in the shadows. Slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. Even when the sheriff told us that they'd issued a statewide alert for Peter James, my heart didn't rest. Because he was a man who could vanish like smoke. Weeks turned into months. I started school again, finished my last semester of high school, and even got accepted into a community college. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. I was quieter. Sharper. I walked through the world like a soldier, ready for battle even in peace. Aunt Rachel tried to help. She signed me up for therapy. Bought me journals. Took me on long walks. Slowly, I started writing down everything. The memories. The nightmares. The lies he used to tell us. And I realized something. I wasn't weak. I was a witness. And the story I had to tell could save someone else. Then one night 5 months after I escaped, we got a call. It was the sheriff. "Rachel," he said, his voice tight, "we think we found him." He had been spotted in Kentucky, living under a false name, working at a scrapyard. They planned to raid the place in the morning. But something in my chest told me he knew. And I was right. That same night, while Aunt Rachel was out picking up groceries, I was alone in the house. I was reading in the kitchen when I heard it. The back door creaked open. I froze. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the kitchen knife. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it steady. A voice. "Marilyn." His voice. I turned slowly. And there he was. Standing in my aunt's kitchen like a ghost in real life. Dirty, tired, eyes wild with fury. "You should have stayed buried," he said. I wanted to scream. But my voice froze in my throat like a block of ice. There he stood, my father. The man who ended my mother's life. The man who tried to bury me alive. The man I thought I'd escaped forever. Yet here he was, breathing in my aunt's kitchen like he had every right. His hair was longer now, his face covered in grime, and his clothes hung loose on his thinner frame. But those eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were the same. He stepped closer. "I didn't come to hurt you, Marilyn," he said, but his tone was twisted, like he believed his own lies. "You've caused enough damage already. The cops are on me because you ran your mouth." I gripped the knife tighter. "Stay away from me," I warned. He smiled, like I was a child playing pretend. "You always were too soft to finish a fight," he said, stepping closer. But I wasn't the same girl he left in that grave. I lunged. The knife sliced across his arm, not deep but enough to make him yell and stumble back. I didn't wait. I ran. Out the front door. Into the night. Barefoot. Heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't look back. I just ran toward the neighbor's house, screaming for help. Lights flicked down the street. Dogs barked. Someone shouted, "What's going on?" I banged on the Jenkins front door, sobbing, "Call the sheriff. He's here. He's in the house." Within 10 minutes, red and blue lights lit up the quiet street. They found him hiding in my aunt's tool shed, clutching an old shovel like a weapon. This time, he didn't run. This time he was caught. The last time I saw my father in person, he was sitting in the back of a police cruiser, bleeding and cuffed, staring at me through the window. He didn't blink. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just watched. Like a hunter eyeing prey that got away. The trial happened 6 months later. I had to testify. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I stood in front of a packed courtroom, my voice shaking, my hands trembling, and told the world what my father did. How he killed my mother. How he tried to kill me. How I had to dig myself out of a grave just to be heard. People cried. Even the judge wiped his eyes. My father never said a word. Not during the trial. Not during sentencing. Not even when they declared he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. I wish I could say that's when everything got better. But healing doesn't come that easy. Some nights I still woke up screaming. Other nights I clutched my pillow so hard it tore at the seams. I stopped trusting people. Stopped talking for weeks at a time. I even pushed Aunt Rachel away, my only lifeline, because I was afraid of losing someone else I loved. But Aunt Rachel never gave up on me. One morning she brought me breakfast on a tray and sat beside me in bed. She didn't say much. She just held my hand. And after a long silence I whispered, "Do you think I'll ever be normal again?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "No, honey," she said. "You won't be normal. You'll be extraordinary." Those words stuck with me. They became the seed of something bigger. Because if I had survived what he did to me, I could survive anything. I went back to college. I majored in social work. I spent years learning how to help other girls. Girls like me, who thought the world had forgotten them. Girls with bruises on their hearts and stories no one believed. By the time I turned 30, I had founded my first women's shelter in Ohio. By 45, I had written a memoir, Buried Alive. One daughter's journey back to light. And when I turned 60, I stood in front of Congress, testifying to help pass stronger protections for victims of domestic abuse. They gave me a standing ovation. But all I could think about was my mom. I hope she saw me that day. I hope she knows I made it. But life wasn't finished surprising me. One sunny afternoon, decades later, I was in my backyard tending to my rose bushes, when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered. "Mrs. Marilyn James?" a man asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Officer Raymond from the Kentucky State Prison. I'm afraid I have some news about your father." My knees almost gave out. I gripped the fence and whispered, "What about him?" "There was an incident in the prison yard. He was found unconscious. He's in critical condition. They're not sure he'll make it." My heart didn't know how to feel. Relief? Anger? Grief? Was it okay to feel nothing? Because at that moment, I felt absolutely nothing. But then the officer said something else. "He's been asking for you." I froze. "He's asking for me?" "Yes, ma'am. Over and over. Just your name." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Should I go? Should I see the man who tried to bury me one last time? Was this closure? Or another trap? I didn't sleep. I just kept hearing his voice. "Marilyn, you always looked too much like her." The next morning I packed my bag. I took the 6:20 a.m. bus from Columbus to Frankfort, Kentucky. It was a 4-hour ride filled with cold coffee, crying toddlers, and my own pounding heart. I stared out the window the entire time, my mind flipping through old memories like a picture book I never wanted to read again. My father, Peter James, was lying in a prison hospital bed. After all these years, after all the pain and nightmares and therapy sessions, he was the one asking to see me? Why? I kept asking myself that question. Was he dying? Was he trying to confess? Or was it another way to break me? The prison guard at the entrance looked at me like I was lost. "Are you here for visitation?" he asked. I nodded. "Who are you here to see?" I swallowed hard. "Peter James." The guard's face tightened. "Room 7. You'll need to sign this waiver. He's in bad shape." They led me down a sterile hallway that smelled like bleach and metal. My hands were sweating. My chest felt tight. Then I saw him. He was lying in a hospital bed, handcuffed to the rails, machines beeping slowly beside him. His face was pale, his hair completely gray, and a long scar ran down his cheek. He looked so small, nothing like the monster that haunted my nightmares. But I didn't let that fool me. A snake in a box is still a snake. His eyes flicked open when he heard the door. And for the first time in over 50 years, our eyes met again. He tried to speak but coughed instead. "Marilyn," he whispered like the name hurt to say. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I stood there, arms folded, waiting. "Why did you call me?" I asked coldly. He smiled weakly. "You're still strong." "Stronger than you ever were," I replied. He winced, not from pain but maybe from guilt. If he even had guilt. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, wheezing between breaths. "I don't need anything from you," I said. "Not your apologies. Not your truth. You had your chance to be a father." "I know," he whispered. "But you need to know why I did it." I froze. Why did he bury his own daughter alive? Why did he end my mother's life? Did he really think there was an answer that would make any of it make sense? But I didn't stop him. Because some part of me, a small, angry, wounded part, needed to hear it. He coughed again, and for a moment I thought he might not be able to finish. Then he looked at me, eyes glassy. "I loved your mother," he said. "Too much. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. And when I came back from the war, I wasn't the same. I saw things. Heard voices. I tried to bury it. I tried to keep it all inside. But every time she looked at me with pity, it made me feel like a ghost." His eyes welled up. "She told me to get help. Begged me. But I couldn't. Men like me didn't go to doctors." We suffered in silence. "You didn't suffer," I snapped. "You made us suffer." He nodded. "You're right. I used to think you were evil," I said. "But maybe you were just weak." He didn't argue. And that silence, that acceptance, hurt worse than anything he could have said. "I knew what I did was wrong," he whispered. "I knew the moment I looked at you in that grave. But I told myself it was for your own good. That the world was too dark for girls like you." He coughed hard and a nurse poked her head in. "5 more minutes," she said softly. I stood there numb. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." and that I was proud of you. I should have felt something. Relief. Peace. Closure. But all I felt was a strange kind of emptiness. Like he had taken so much from me. There was nothing left for him to steal. I took a deep breath. I survived you, I said quietly. And I became the woman Mom wanted me to be. Not because of you, but despite you. I turned to leave. He whispered behind me, Marilyn. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. I hope your next life is better, I said and walked out. I didn't cry on the bus ride home. I didn't think about what he said. I just stared at the road ahead. 2 weeks later I got the call. Peter James died in his sleep. No funeral. No family to claim the body. The state buried him. Unmarked grave. Just like the one he gave me. I stood in my garden the next morning watching the sun rise over my roses. I felt the breeze on my face and listened to the birds singing. I was alive. I had my children. My grandchildren. And the ghosts? They were quieter now. Still there but distant. Then that afternoon my granddaughter Lily came running to me. She was only 8 with big blue eyes and hair just like mine used to be. Grandma, she said, holding up a paper from school, can you help me with my history project? I smiled. Yes, baby. Of course. She looked at me seriously. It's about strong women. My breath caught. And right there, under the bright sun and the smell of roses, I felt it. Not pain. Not fear. But healing. But just when I thought the past had finally let go. A letter arrived in the mail. No return address. No name. Just 5 words written in shaky ink. He wasn't working alone, Marilyn. I stared at the envelope in my hands. It was thin. Pale gray. Ordinary. But those 5 words on the note inside? They felt like a lightning bolt crashing through years of calm. He wasn't working alone, Marilyn. My hands shook. For a long time I just stood there on my front porch, the wind brushing my silver hair across my face, the sun warm on my skin, but none of it felt real. Who would send this? Why now? After all these years of silence, healing and rebuilding, why now? And what did it mean? Who else could have been involved? I went inside and sat down at my kitchen table. The same table where my grandchildren ate cookies. The same table where I wrote letters to lawmakers about domestic abuse prevention. The same table that had become my quiet sanctuary. Now it felt like a crime scene again. I read the note over and over. There were no fingerprints. No signature. No clue. But one thing was clear. Someone knew something. And they wanted me to dig it back up. I didn't want to go back. I had spent so many years burying the past with prayer, therapy, and purpose. But you can't ignore a letter like that. So I did what I had trained myself to do. I wrote everything down. I made a list. I pulled out my old journals, boxes of them stored in the attic like sealed wounds, and flipped through every page. That's when I found it. An old entry from 1965, written just days before my mother died. Dad's been leaving at night again. He says he's going to the VFW lodge, but Mom doesn't believe him. She said she heard him on the phone whispering about cleaning things up. I don't know what he's planning, but it scares me. I had forgotten I even wrote that. But reading it now, it was like hearing my younger self whisper from the past. I needed help. And there was only one person who might still have answers. Sheriff Tom Watkins. He had retired years ago. Last I heard he moved down to Florida with his daughter. So I made a few calls, leaned on a few old connections, and by the next evening I had a number. I sat in my living room, phone in hand, staring at it for a good 10 minutes before I finally hit call. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hello. Sheriff Watkins? I asked. This is Tom. Who's this? Marilyn James. Silence. Then a sharp breath. Oh, my God. It's been decades. Are you okay? I paused. No. I don't think I am. The next morning he called me back. I had a bad feeling after we talked, he said. So I pulled some files from my storage. Things I probably should have looked at closer back then. My heart pounded. What did you find? He hesitated. There were reports. From neighbors. About a man who kept visiting your dad when your mom was at work. Nobody knew who he was. Drove a red truck. Wore army boots. Some folks thought he was a cousin. But he never gave a name. I sat up straight. I don't remember a red truck. That's the thing, Tom said. You wouldn't have. Most of it happened while you were at school. But I've got something better. One of your neighbors took down the license plate. My breath caught. Do you still have it? I'm mailing it to you now. 3 days later, a yellowed envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a faded index card, the handwriting barely legible. Arkansas plate, 2BJ 416. I stared at it like it might burst into flames. Suddenly the past wasn't just a memory, it was a puzzle. And I wasn't going to stop until I finished it. I reached out to an old friend of mine from college, Patrick, who had worked for the DMV before retiring. He owed me a favor, or 5. I sent him the plate number, told him it was for personal closure. He didn't ask questions. 2 days later he called. Marilyn, you're not going to like this. Try me. That plate was registered to a man named William Banks. He was in the military with your father. Dishonorably discharged. Moved around a lot. Real low profile. And get this. What? He died in 1972. Car crash. No known family. But guess where the crash happened? My throat tightened. Where? Just 10 miles from where your father was hiding when the cops caught him. I sat in silence, my mind racing. What if William Banks wasn't just a visitor? What if he helped my father? Helped plan it? Helped cover it up? Was he there the night my mother died? Was he the reason my father thought he could get away with it? And more terrifying, was there anyone else? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the letter on my nightstand. He wasn't working alone. It echoed in my ears. Like a riddle with no answer. Like a warning. The next morning I got another envelope. This time there was no letter. Just a photograph. It was black and white. In it, my father stood beside a man in military uniform. Tall, dark beard, army boots. Written on the back in smudged pencil. Fort Knox. 1964. Me and Will. I now had a face. A name. A connection. And a feeling in my gut I couldn't shake. This story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because if someone had those photos, someone who knew what happened, that meant they were watching. Waiting. And I had no idea if they were trying to help me. Or silence me. I held the photograph in my hands for what felt like an hour. It was cold like the memories it carried. 2 men in uniform. My father on the left, eyes distant, jaw set like stone. And next to him, the man I now knew as William Banks. The man who might have helped him destroy our family. My fingers trembled as I turned the photo back over. Fort Knox. 1964. Me and Will. Why was this picture sent to me now? Was it proof? Was it a threat? Or worse, was it a message from someone who knew everything? I locked all my doors that night. Pulled the curtains. Turned on every outside light. My instincts from decades ago returned like muscle memory. Watch the windows, check behind you, sleep lightly. Just like I had after crawling out of that grave. I sat up in bed, the photo on my lap, the letter beside me, and a new thought creeping through my mind. What if someone was still out there, trying to finish what my father started? The next morning I did what any grandmother who'd been through war would do. I made tea, tied my hair up in a bun, and began to dig. Not in the backyard this time, but into government records. I called a librarian I once mentored, now working in Washington. She had access to military archives. Can you find anything on William Banks? I asked. Military files, service records, anything classified or otherwise? She paused. I can try, but you'll owe me pie. 2 slices. Deal, I said. And 3 days later she delivered. Marilyn, she said over the phone, her voice tight, you're not going to believe this. Try me. William Banks and your father. They weren't just soldiers. They were part of something called Operation Whisper. I blinked. Operation what? It was a top-secret internal experiment in the 1960s. Psychological warfare training. Trauma exposure. Mind manipulation. It was eventually shut down. Too many mental health breakdowns, too many deaths. I felt a chill down my spine. She continued. Peter James and William Banks were 2 of the longest participants. Their records show violent tendencies post-discharge, both flagged by VA hospitals, but nothing was ever done. Why? I asked. Because the records were buried. Probably to avoid lawsuits. So that was it. My father wasn't just a damaged man. He was trained to damage. And William Banks, he wasn't just a friend. He was a partner. I wondered if my mother ever knew. if she ever realized the storm she was sleeping beside. And for the first time in decades, I understood the full scope of what had happened. My father hadn't just snapped. He was programmed to break. And the ones who built him that way, they walked away untouched. I wanted to be done. I truly did. I wanted to take the photo, the note, and the horror and bury it all deep where no light could reach. But the envelope had one more surprise. Taped to the inside flap was a USB stick. I plugged it into my laptop, breath held tight. One file. No label. Just a video. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white, filmed in a room with a military emblem on the wall. Two men sat at a table, my father and William Banks. A voice from behind the camera asked, "What's your mission?" Peter answered first. "Observe. Report. Suppress." Then William. "Control. Eliminate threats. Reset." Then they both looked at the camera. Pulled. Mechanical. Like puppets with their strings pulled by someone we couldn't see. Then the voice asked again, "And if your family becomes a threat?" Peter blinked slowly. "Eliminate." I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was racing. Tears welled in my eyes. Not just because of what I saw, but because it confirmed everything I feared. He wasn't acting alone. And worse, he thought he was following orders. That night I sat by the fire with my journal open. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Every memory. Every scream. Every buried secret. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a government story. A buried chapter of American history that someone still didn't want uncovered. And the letter, the photo, the USB, they weren't just reminders. They were breadcrumbs, leading me somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The next morning I got a text from an unknown number. "You're close. Stop digging." I stared at it, the phone trembling in my hand. The past wasn't just alive. It was watching me. I stared at the message on my phone until the screen dimmed. "You're close. Stop digging." There was no name. No number. Just those 5 words. It felt like someone had reached through the past and grabbed me by the throat. I looked around my living room. The curtains were shut, the doors were locked, and yet I felt eyes on me. Like someone was just outside, watching, waiting, daring me to take another step closer to the truth. But they didn't know me. They didn't know that I had crawled out of a grave once. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I was the storm. I called Aunt Rachel. Even though she was in a retirement home now, her voice still had that calm strength I clung to as a girl. "You think it's a threat?" she asked. "I know it is." She paused. "Then don't stop." I blinked. "What?" "Whatever you're digging up, Marilyn, someone's scared. That means it matters." So I didn't stop. I went back through the documents. The USB footage. The old journals. And something clicked. Reset. That was one of the words they used in the video. Control. Eliminate threats. Reset. Why that word? I searched it along with Operation Whisper in declassified archives and obscure forums. Nothing came up at first, but after a few hours I found a buried thread on an old veterans board. Someone using the handle WJerrySet64 had posted over a decade ago. Fort Knox. Whisper. Not all of us followed through. Not all of us forgot. One kept the files. I can't say more. Look in Raleigh. Raleigh? North Carolina? It was vague. Paranoid. Probably written by someone hiding from shadows. But I had nothing else. The next day I booked a one-way bus ticket to Raleigh. I didn't tell my grandkids. Didn't tell my therapist. Only Aunt Rachel knew. "I'm too old to play detective," I joked. She replied, "You're not playing, sweetheart. You're living." Raleigh was quiet when I arrived. Rain fell softly and the sky was gray like an old scar. I had only a P.O. box listed in the Threads user profile, something barely legible after years of internet decay. So I went there. A rusted-out office supply store with mailboxes lining the wall like forgotten graves. Box 184. I tapped it. I noticed something. Inside the slot taped to the back was a folded piece of paper. I used a bobby pin to fish it out, heart racing. Read. "If you found this, it means I'm gone. There's a storage unit. Key is taped under box 198. Unit number 11. Go alone. Don't trust anyone." I followed the instructions. Under box 198, taped with old electrician's tape, was a small brass key. The storage facility was a few miles out, gray, silent, lined with metal doors. Unit 11 was near the end, out of sight from the road. I hesitated at the door. This could be a trap. A setup. But I didn't come this far to turn around now. I unlocked it and pulled the door up. Inside was a dusty metal filing cabinet, one wooden chair, and a single sealed envelope on the floor. On the front, written in red ink, "For MJ." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph, black and white. A group shot of men in uniform, dozens of them. In the center, circled in ink, were my father, William Banks, and a third man. I leaned in closer. He was older, sharper eyes, authority in his posture. And beneath the photo, written in typewriter font, Colonel Everett Monroe, architect of Whisper. Still alive. My chest tightened. Alive? That would make him maybe older. But if this was true, if he was still living, then there was a man out there who designed the nightmare that stole my childhood. He had names, files, secrets, and I was going to find him. But then behind me, a voice. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. A man in a black windbreaker stood in the doorway. Mid-60s. Trim. Gray stubble. No expression. "Who are you?" I demanded. He stepped forward. "I used to work with your father. And I've been following you since Kentucky." My breath caught. "What do you want?" "To warn you. If you go after Monroe, you won't make it out." I stepped closer, chin raised. "Why?" "Because the truth is too ugly to face." "No," he said. "Because Monroe has nothing to lose. And he's not the only one still loyal." I didn't flinch. I had faced down death before. And now I was standing in its shadow again. But I wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. "I buried the past once," I said calmly. "And I crawled out of it." "I know," he whispered. "That's what scares them." He turned and walked away. I stood in that storage unit holding the photo tight to my chest. As now, I had a new name, a new target, and a burning question inside me. If Monroe created the monsters, how many more were still out there? His name echoed in my mind the entire ride back to my motel. Colonel Everett Monroe. The man behind Operation Whisper. The man who trained my father. The man who, if the photo and note were true, was still alive. I couldn't sleep that night. I paced the thin carpet floor of my room, my shadow stretched across the walls, as I replayed every memory, every word from that man in the windbreaker. "If you go after Monroe, you won't make it out." That wasn't a warning. That was a promise. By morning I had a plan. I called Patrick, the DMV friend who owed me pie and had access to databases the public couldn't touch. I sent him a scan of the photo and the name, Everett Monroe. "Don't dig too deep," I warned. "Just confirm if he's alive." 2 hours later, Patrick called back. "Monroe's alive. Born 1933. Lives in a private compound in South Carolina. No social media. Military pension. He's off-grid, Marilyn. Real off-grid. But someone's still sending him money every month from a black budget account." I closed my eyes. He was real. He was being protected. And I was going to confront him. I packed a small bag. Just essentials. Flashlight. Old press badge. An envelope of printed documents. And the photo. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Only Aunt Rachel. She begged me not to go. "What if they hurt you, Marilyn? You've already survived enough." I held her hand and kissed her cheek. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said. "I'm doing it for the truth." The Monroe compound sat at the edge of an old pine forest, surrounded by rusting wire fencing and a gate with no visible guard. The air smelled like iron and old secrets. I parked my rental car a mile away and walked through the trees, my cane tapping against the roots, my knees stiff with age, but my heart beating strong. I reached the gate just after dusk. There was no buzzer. No intercom. Just silence. And then, a flicker of motion behind the trees. A sensor light. Someone was watching. I pulled the photo from my coat and held it high. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I shouted. "I just want to talk to Colonel Monroe." No answer. Only wind. And then, the gate creaked open. I stepped through slowly. The compound was eerie. 4 small cabins, a larger house at the center, and a flagpole with no flag. The silence pressed on me like a weight. Then the front door opened. And there he was. Colonel Everett Monroe. He was in a wheelchair, hunched but not frail. His eyes were sharp, piercing. The kind of eyes that had given orders others didn't dare question. "You're Peter's girl," he said without emotion. "The one who survived." I nodded, clutching the photo. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why create men like him?" He motioned for me to come inside. His house was quiet. Simple. Books stacked everywhere. Maps on the wall. No TV. Just a single photo of a military squad framed over the fireplace. He stared into the flames, his voice low. "After Korea, they asked me to design a program that could train emotional suppression into soldiers. We needed men who wouldn't break. Who wouldn't question orders. Whisper was born from that idea." He paused. "But I made a mistake. I thought we could control what we created." "You couldn't," I said coldly. "You built monsters." "No," he replied, turning to me. "I broke men. Your father was one of many. We took away his empathy, his fear, his hesitation. But we didn't replace it with anything." I swallowed hard. "And William Banks?" He nodded. "He was my enforcer. He kept the broken ones in line. But your father was different. He fell in love. And love was not part of the program." I stepped closer. "So what happened the night my mother died?" Monroe looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "She wasn't the target." "What?" "She was a witness. Your father was the target. Whisper had failed with him. He had started leaking things, telling people, crying in his sleep. They feared he'd expose everything. Your mother wanted to take him to a VA hospital. They couldn't allow that. Banks was sent to reset him." I shook my head. "No. He killed her. He buried me alive." Monroe's jaw tightened. "And if you hadn't crawled out of that grave, they would have cleaned it all up. Like they did with the others." I stood there, shaking, overwhelmed. It had never been about me. Not really. I was just a girl who saw too much. My mother was collateral damage. My father was a failed asset. Monroe? He was the architect of all of it. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, voice trembling. "Because I'm dying," he said flatly. "And because someone needs to remember." I stared at him. "I didn't come for a story," I said. "I came for justice. There is no justice for ghosts, Marilyn. Only the truth." He reached beside him and pulled out a sealed folder. "Take this. Everything. Documents. Names. What they did. Where the rest of them are buried." I hesitated. "What happens if I take this public?" He smiled sadly. "They'll deny it. Call you senile. Say you're grieving a father who lost his mind." I took the folder. "I don't care what they call me," I said. "The truth is mine now." As I left the house, the wind picked up. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. Monroe had handed me the truth. But I still had one more choice to make. Expose it all, or protect my family from the storm that would follow. That night, back in my motel, I opened the folder. Inside were hundreds of pages. Code names, transcripts, photographs, and one line written at the top of the first page. "What is buried must one day rise." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel room with the folder open across my lap. Its contents sprawled over the bed like shattered glass from a long-buried truth. Every document, every name, every classified seal. It felt like I was holding a living thing. A monster finally unchained. The colonel hadn't lied. Inside the folder were lists of participants from Operation Whisper. Psychological evaluations with words like sociopathic resilience and empathy suppression successful. Handwritten memos suggesting field tests, including civilian proximity exposure. And among them, a file labeled Subject P. James. Status. Critical instability. Recommended action. Elimination. Handler. W. Banks. I clutched that paper until it wrinkled under my fingers. So it was true. My father hadn't acted alone. His friend, William, wasn't just a fellow soldier, he was a handler. He was sent to monitor him, to eliminate him. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. At 4:12 a.m. I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks on my hotel door. I froze. The papers rustled as I grabbed them and tucked the folder under the mattress. Knock, knock, knock. Who is it? I shouted. No answer. I grabbed my cane and slipped my hand into the drawer where my grandmother's old revolver rested. I hadn't fired it in decades, but my fingers remembered the weight. I opened the door. No one. Just the night. But taped to the outside handle was a plain business card. On it, a single typed message. You've gone too far. I sat down on the bed, clutching the gun and the card. The motel room felt smaller now. The truth wasn't a light anymore. It was fire. And fire draws attention. I had a decision to make. Do I go public? Or do I disappear like so many before me? The next morning I drove to Charleston, South Carolina. I had an old college friend there, Diane, who worked for an independent investigative newsroom called The Ledger. She'd been trying to blow the whistle on government corruption for decades. If there was one person crazy and brave enough to help me leak this, it was her. I showed up at her office unannounced. She gasped when she saw me. Marilyn James? Is that really you? I need your help, I said, laying the folder on her desk. 10 minutes later she locked the door, closed the blinds and leaned in. What am I looking at? The truth, I said. And maybe my last breath. We worked for hours. Cross-checking records. Verifying names. Calling off the record sources who owed Diane favors. And by nightfall she looked at me with a stunned expression. This isn't just an exposé, she said. It's a bombshell. If this hits the wire, it's going to rattle the Pentagon. Are you sure you're ready for that? I looked her dead in the eyes. They killed my mother. Tried to kill me. Then spent decades hiding behind fake medals and sealed records. I slid the photo of my father and Banks across the table. I was buried alive. I won't be silent anymore. Diane agreed to launch the story in phases. Small drops at first, then a full feature with evidence. But the next morning, everything changed. I got a call. Unknown number. A voice calm and low. You still have time to walk away. I hung up. Then Diane called. Marilyn. Something's wrong. My office was broken into. Nothing taken, just rifled through. My stomach dropped. They're watching us. We have to go dark, she said. Lay low until this goes live. Then I know where I need to be, I whispered. I drove back to Ohio. To the only place that ever felt safe. Aunt Rachel's old house. She had passed just 2 months earlier. Left it to me in her will. The garden still bloomed. The wind still carried the smell of her rosewater soap. It was quiet. And for now, safe. I boarded up the windows. Installed a new deadbolt. And every night I stayed up reading the folder, preparing myself for questions that might come when this broke. But the night before the first article dropped, something happened. I was in the garden watering the plants under the moonlight when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the trees. Dressed in black. So, watching. I called out. He didn't move. Just lifted one arm slowly, and pointed directly at me. Then he disappeared into the dark. I ran inside, locked the door and pulled the curtain shut. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to silence me. The next morning I called Diane. Is the story still going live? She hesitated. There's been pushback. Legal threats. Pressure from federal sources. They're threatening to shut us down if we publish. My breath caught. No, Diane. We have to go forward. I know, she said. But if I do, they might come after you. I stood in my kitchen staring at the old photo of my mother on the fridge. She had trusted the wrong man. And paid with her life. I'm not afraid, I said. Tell the truth. That afternoon the Ledger published a teaser article. Whisper Files. The secret military program that created killers and tried to bury the evidence. Within an hour it had 80,000 shares. By midnight 3 government spokespeople denied it all. But survivors started speaking up. One man emailed Diane. I was in the program. I remember Monroe. I remember Peter James. I thought I imagined it all. Another woman posted online. My father came home from the war, and was never the same. He said they trained the soul out of us. But not all responses were supportive. Diane's website was hit by cyber attacks. I started receiving emails with subject lines like, "Enough, Grandma," and "You won't be warned again." And then a final message arrived. An image. A photo of my home. Taken that morning. The photo was timestamped 6:17 a.m. It showed my house bathed in golden morning light. Me just barely visible, watering the roses out front. I dropped my phone. My heart slammed against my ribs like a warning bell. They were here. Someone had been watching me, from within my own street. I wasn't safe. Not anymore. I paced the hallway, locking every door again, checking the windows twice. My breathing was shallow. I was 76 years old, but at that moment I felt like the 17-year-old girl again. Digging through dirt, gasping for breath, clawing for survival. Only now the grave wasn't made of soil. It was true. And I was standing in it willingly. I called Diane. "This isn't just exposure," I said. "This is war. They're targeting your house?" They sent a photo. From my front yard. "They want me to back down." She was silent for a moment. Then we go all in. By evening, Diane had published the full Whisper files. Every scanned page, every photo, every memo Monroe had given me. It included psychological reports on Whisper test subjects, handwritten mission notes from William Banks, video transcripts, including the line, "And if your family becomes a threat, eliminate." And Monroe's dying admission written in his own words. "We were told to build tools, not men." It was live. And it couldn't be unseen. The internet exploded. Whistleblower groups picked it up. Military veterans started coming forward anonymously, confirming fragments of the story. Major news outlets couldn't ignore it anymore. By day 3 it was trending nationwide. #WhisperFiles. #BuriedTruth. #Marilyn survived. I never imagined my name would be plastered across headlines. Not as a victim, but as the woman who survived the unspeakable and spoke anyway. But exposure came with consequences. The threats worsened. Cars lingered too long near my house. Drones buzzed overhead. One night I came outside to find my mailbox torn off and a note nailed to the front door. "You opened the door. Now don't cry when the wind comes through." I called Diane. "We need protection." He contacted a friend, retired FBI. He sent someone to stay nearby, unofficially. But even with that I didn't sleep. The war outside wasn't bullets, it was silence. Surveillance. The kind of fear that seeps under doors. I felt like prey. But I refused to run. 1 week later the story took an unexpected turn. An anonymous letter was sent to the Ledger. Inside was a copy of a presidential memo dated 1971 marked "Top Secret, Operation Whisper Decommission." In it, a young White House aide recommended a total purge of the program, citing moral decay and imminent legal risk. Signed at the bottom, Everett Monroe. I read it 3 times. He tried to shut it down? Or was it just a move to cover his own tracks? It didn't erase what he'd done. But it showed he knew it was evil even back then. And then something happened that I never expected. A letter. Handwritten. From prison. From my father. "Marilyn, I don't know how you're still alive. Or how you found the strength to fight them. But I'm not surprised. You were always braver than I was. I see your name on the news now. I see people holding signs with their faces, chanting in the streets. I see a nation waking up because my daughter refused to stay quiet. I wish I could go back and undo it all. I wish I had listened to your mother. I wish I had left before the monster inside me took over. But I want you to know this, what they made me into, that wasn't your father. That was a ghost in a uniform. You survived the grave. Now you're giving the rest of us peace. I'm proud of you." That. I didn't cry. I just sat on the porch holding that letter, staring at the sunset. Not for him. But for me. Because I had finally made peace with something I thought I never could. My past was not my shame. It was my power. The Whisper files sparked federal investigations. 2 senators called for hearings. The Department of Defense denied everything, but the evidence was undeniable. For weeks my phone rang with requests. Interviews. Books. Netflix. I turned most of them down. Because I didn't do this for money. I did it so no girl would ever wake up in a grave again. No. I lived quietly. In the same house. The same garden. Same roses. But when my grandkids ask why grandma always double-checks the locks, I don't hide the truth anymore. I tell them. Because once upon a time the people who were supposed to protect us tried to bury me. But I stood back up. I fought. And I won. If you're watching this, if you're listening to my story and you've ever felt like no one believes you, let me say this clearly. You are not crazy. You are not weak. And you are not alone. The darkness will always whisper. But you were born to rise. Just like I did.